All right, so today we're going to be learning about solving, multiplying, and dividing inequalities. So remember your inverse operations again. Multiplication is the opposite of division, and division is the opposite of multiplication. They cancel each other out. So I'm really going to encourage you to use the see and solve method whenever you do these. What you see is what the inequality has. How to solve it is going to be the opposite of what you see the inequality has. So remember here, we see x being divided by 5. We want to see what is happening to our variable, what is happening to our letter. So what we see is dividing by 5. So the opposite of dividing by 5 would be multiplying by 5. And remember, we need to use opposites because we need to cancel out anything on the side of x or anything on the side of the variable. So what we see is division. That's going to go in our first fill in the blank. How we're going to solve is using multiplication. So how we're going to solve, the multiply by 5 is going to go on both sides of the inequality here, okay? And here, dividing and multiplying by the same number, remember it cancels out. And 4 times 5 is 20. And then we're just going to repeat the inequality that we see. So we see the greater than inequality. So we're going to put x is greater than 20 in our solution. Now, whenever we graph this, remember that there's no line underneath. So we want an open circle over 20. And because our greater than symbol is present, we want to make sure that we shade in a greater than direction. And remember, the further we go right on a number line, the greater our value gets. So we're looking for an open circle with a shade to the right of 20. So when we get here, we want to find that open circle, which you can clearly see is B here, the second one, and we're shading in a greater than direction, right? The number should be greater in which we're shading. So you would choose B or the second one. All right, so again, we're going to use that see and solve. What we see is what's in the inequality. How we're going to solve it is by canceling out by using the inverse operation, which is the opposite one. So remember, we always want to ask ourselves, what is it that we see is happening to the x here? Remember, when there's nothing between the number and the variable, that means we are multiplying. So what we see is multiplying by 6. So the opposite of multiplying by 6 would be dividing by 6. And this is how we're going to solve. So we see we see multiplication. So the inequality has multiplication. So I need to use division to solve it. So that's when you're going to find your divide by 6. And you're going to put it underneath each side. Remember, the side of the variable is always going to cancel out. That's why you're using opposites. And then 30 divided by 6 is 5. And here we just want to repeat the inequality that we see. So we see a greater than or equal to symbol. So that's the symbol we want to use, the greater than or equal to. So x is greater than or equal to 5. Okay. So now when we graph this, because it has that line underneath, because we said greater than or above the 5, we want a closed circle. And this is red, x is greater than 5. So we want to shade in a greater than direction, which means you're going to be shading to the right. So you're looking for that closed circle with a shade to the right on the next question, which you can clearly see in the very first one. You have that closed circle over 5 and you are shading to the right. All right, let's look at another one here. Again, we're going to use that see and solve method. So we're going to use see and solve, which is basically what this is saying over here. It's just another thing to help you out. So what we see is happening to the variable, the x, is that we are multiplying by 4. Remember, if you can squeeze that little dot in there, that's an indication you know you can multiply, or you know that you're multiplying. So what we see is multiplying by 4. So the opposite of multiplying by 4 would be dividing by 4. So here, what we see is multiplication. How we're going to solve is division. So we're going to put divide by 4 on both sides. Remember, the side of x cancels out. And then negative 16 divided by positive 4 is a negative 4. And then we're just going to repeat the inequality that we see. A less than or equal to inequality. So we're going to go ahead and put x is less than or equal to 4. So when we go to graph it now, you want a closed circle because we can include the value of negative 4. A closed circle above negative 4. And it says x is less than. So we want to shade to the left because remember, the further we go left on a number line, the smaller our values get. So we want to make sure we're shading to the left where all the values are smaller than a negative 4. So when we go to the next one, you can clearly see here, here's a closed dot, but it's being shaded right, so we don't want that one. We have 2 open dots above the 12. We definitely don't want these, so we want the negative 4 closed dot shaded to the left. So we want the last one here. All right, last one we're going to do together. Again, we're going to use that see and solve method, which is basically what's being said over here. It's just another strategy to help you out in case you're getting confused. All right, so here you always want to ask yourself, what is it that you see is happening to that letter, that variable? So what is happening to the variable x here? X is being divided by 3. That's what we actually see. So now when we solve, we're going to use the opposite, which is multiply 3. So we're going to go ahead and fill that in. What we see is division. How we're going to solve is multiplication, and we're going to put our multiply by 3 on both sides. Okay, remember the side of x is going to cancel out. That's why we're using opposites. We're going to repeat the inequality, which is the less than, and a negative 6 times 3 is a negative 18. So the inequality we want to put here is x is less than negative 18. Now, remember when we graph, we are not going to include the value of negative 18 because it does not say or equal to. There's no line underneath. So we're going to put an open circle above the 18. And remember, if the inequality says less, it tells us, and it even points left, we're going to shade in a less than direction, which is left. Okay, so then when we go to the last one, we're going to look for that open circle above the, negative 18, not a positive 18. Let me go ahead and put that negative there. So we want that open circle like you see here on C, or the third one, negative 18, and you're shading in a less than direction. So you want the third one.